My name is Terry Leventhal. I'm the director of the Cockburn Association, and I'm thrilled to be able to kind of welcome you to kind of this Zoom virtual Cockburn Annual Lecture. It's a bit later than we would usually be doing it because we were completing kind of a series of Cockburn Conversations on hidden histories, which I highly commend to you to go visit our Cockburn Association YouTube channel to see the content of some of those kind of talks. There's some really kind of fabulous ones. And I was just reflecting as we were just getting ready for the meeting, is it seems a world away when in March we decided to close the office on the back of the global pandemic. And the initial indications were that it was for a 12-week kind of period, returning to the office in June. Well, gosh, did we ever kind of get that one kind of wrong? And it is just amazing how much this global pandemic has actually flipped everybody's kind of lives going forward. And who would have thought that we would have become so potentially proficient in kind of using kind of Zoom as a major conferencing tool. What I want to kind of remind you is tonight's kind of talk is by our kind of chairman, Professor Cliff Hague. And before I kind of fully introduce Cliff for the kind of outcome of the kind of talk on whose festivals is it anyway, just to kind of remind you that if you do plan on kind of tweeting or posting on Facebook, please do. We encourage you to kind of do so. And you can actually, if you can actually make sure you tag us at the Cockburn, and that's for either Twitter or for Facebook as well. That would be a really kind of useful thing, and please do it regularly and fulsomely as the evening kind of goes along. We will be recording kind of this and placing it up on our YouTube channel later, so if you have to duck out or if you want to refer back to it or encourage kind of friends to have a look at it, then you'll be able to do so in the next coming days. And what we'll be trying to do just as we get going is we're having a problem with the interface with live Facebook, but we're going to keep pestering away at that to see if we can get a broadcast live as well. So without any really further kind of ado, tonight's talk, as I said, is whose festival is it anyway, which will be given by the chairman of the Cockburn Association, Professor Cliff Hague. Cliff is a consultant, researcher, kind of author and a trainer, known to many as a professor emeritus of planning and spatial development. I think that an awful lot of the City Council's planning department were educated by Cliff at some time in the kind of past. He's a past president of the Royal Town Planning Institute, as well as the Commonwealth Association of Planners, where he also served as Secretary kind of General. Now, Cliff has had a huge kind of range of experience, not only in kind of spatial planning, but also providing voluntary assistance in the 70s on planning and housing, where he very much kind of helped in the creation and fostering the Craig Miller Festival Society, which of course is going to be an opposite kind of issue for us kind of today as well. And as well as kind of teaching, he's also been a part-time tutor for the Open University. Boy, he's been around doing kind of things as well. Past chairman of Built Environment Forum Scotland. He is a member of the UK's Academy for the Social Sciences, a patron of Planning Aid for Scotland. He was given an OBE in the kind of honours list in 2016, much deserved. And of course, most importantly, above all, he is the chairman of the Cockburn Association. So if I, without any further kind of ado, hand over to Cliff to take us through his talk for tonight. Cliff.
Okay, thank you very much, Terry, and welcome everybody on St Andrew's Day. Special welcome, of course, to those of you who are Cockburn members. I prepared a PowerPoint which I'm going to talk through, but fingers crossed it'll all work okay. So I'm just going to start this screen share now. Okay.
Fantastic.
Right, apologize for the first glitch of the evening. Okay, so I think we're right now. So yeah, I say welcome everybody, apologize for that, and let's move on. So assured that we all hope that once this virus is over, we'll be able to get back to normal as previous festival summers have been. And have to remember that the normality for some people is that they are actually quite distant from the festival, maybe physically, but also in terms of a sense of attachment to it. The City Council's Edinburgh Poverty Commission reported in September of this year, and these are a couple of quotes from what they said. They said that people talk about some of the city's institutions such as the festivals or tourist attractions, whose value seems remote to the lives of many citizens. And in particular, and perhaps very contemporary with what's been happening in recent days, as revealed by Brian Ferguson in his articles in the Scotsman. The Poverty Commission said that in the renewal of Edinburgh's festivals and tourism economy post-COVID, Scottish Government and the City of Edinburgh Council should ensure that any public funding is conditional on delivery of actions to promote inclusion and equality in the city. So there are some question marks about the normality to which we might aspire to return. So the talk is going to run through 4 points, really. First of all, I just want to sketch a bit of the history. It'd be familiar with many people, but I think it sets a context. Then, for the main part, I want to concentrate on what I've called governance for festivalisation, how we've come about through a system of governance, getting the situation that we've had for the last few years. I also want to look at some of the consequences of those actions, and then finally raise questions about possible future festivals, taking account of the damage that COVID has done this year. So 3 phases of Edinburgh festivals, I think, can be identified from the little bit of background research that I've done. The first one, as we all know, I think the festival started in 1947 with 3 festivals: the International Festival, Festival Fringe, and the Film Festival. And then the 2 followed in 1950. And then you wait 28 years before another festival is added. And that's the Blues and Jazz Festival, and then the Book Festival follows after that. So what you have during this period, I would say, is a period of relative stability in terms of the delivery and scope of the festivals. And there were, of course, some controversies. Many people fretted over the cost to the ratepayers of supporting the festivals. There was this great scandal in 1963 when a naked woman was wheeled across a balcony there, which led to what was called the Lady McChatterley trial that year. And there was also an ongoing criticism that the festivals were by their nature elitist and didn't really serve the interests of substantial sections of the city. We then come into phase 2, which I've defined as 1989 to 1995. And I create this as a phase because during that period, 4 festivals were initiated. And as I say, that compares with just 2 being added over a 28-year period not long before that. So the 4 were as listed here: the Science Festival, the Storytelling Festival, the Children's Festival, and the Edinburgh Mela. And also, I think, as far as I can see, during this period, there was rather less controversy. The edges went off things, and there was a general acceptance of the role of the festivals in the civic life and in the wider cultural life of Edinburgh. The third phase I date as beginning in 1996, because that's the first ticketed Edinburgh Hogmanay. Now, again, as I'm sure many people know, there was a long-standing tradition of people welcoming the new year on the high street, which was a free event. But there were problems in terms of overcrowding, safety issues, and so on. And from 1996, we see ticketing introduced. And that's followed in 1999 by the introduction of Edinburgh Christmas. And then again, another couple of festivals were added soon after that: the Art Festival 2004 and the Food Festival a decade later. And where we've come during this period is the rise of new controversies, new terms even that people didn't use before, such as over-tourism, commodification of public space, festivalization, critiques, again, recently aired about lack of diversity in the festival, and so on. So we got those 3 phases. And what I'm now wanting to do is really explore in the second section of the talk how we came to where we are now. And that really therefore focuses on this third phase of the festivals that I've just outlined. And these are just images of a few of the the key reports at that stage, which I'll talk through. Now, a crucial report is called Thundering Hooves, and that was published in 2005. And I think it's really there where we start to ask, whose festival is it? It was commissioned by the following groups that are listed there: Scottish Arts Council, Festivals Edinburgh, City of Edinburgh Council, Scottish Executive, Events Scotland, and Scottish Enterprise Edinburgh and Lothian. And its brief to the consultants was to examine the competitive position of Edinburgh's 11 festivals. And the work that they did scenario planning workshops with their clients who are already listed there. And they did a series of in-depth interviews with the Scottish Arts Council, with Festival Edinburgh member festivals, with the leader of the City Council, with the Scottish Executive, people in culture, tourism and sport, and also with the Royal Bank of Scotland tourism manager. So basically, it's commissioned by a group of institutions, and the research substantially involves collecting information from those same institutions. And the key message that came out was that festivals should be seen as strategic devices to promote tourism and brand identity. And that, to take a quote there, economic benefits are perhaps the defining context. So we've gone from a range of cultural festivals with various target audiences to a view that the economic benefits are really what defined the festivals. They said in the Thundering Hooves report that Edinburgh's global preeminence is being challenged by other cities investing in cultural infrastructure and programming. And that's certainly true. And again, I've got figures which I've not got in this presentation that shows that. But crucially, what they argued is that this is a winner-takes-all game. And Edinburgh at the moment has got the gold medal, but it's a world where second place is for losers. So what was needed, they said, was for Edinburgh to invest more in its festivals and to ensure that no new festivals were created unless there's a distinct international niche for them. So whose festival is it? Anyway, you can have a new festival if there's an international niche for it. They also noted that health inequality and poverty in Scotland may result in funds being diverted from the arts, and this was something to guard against. Following that report, Thundering Hooves 2006, the Festival Forum was established in 2007 with a brief to implement the recommendations of that Thundering Hooves report. And its aims, as you can see there, are to maintain the festival city's global competitive edge through major collaborative projects and strategic initiatives. So who are the Festivals Forum? Well, the members are the chief executive officers or the directors of Festivals Edinburgh, Edinburgh Tourism Action Group, ETAG, the Chamber of Commerce, the University of Edinburgh, chief executive of the City Council, Director of Culture of the City Council, and the convener and vice convener of the City Council's Culture and Communities Committee. Along with these others, Scottish Government, listed there, the departments, Visit Scotland, Scottish Enterprise, Creative Scotland, and also the British Council of Scotland, with 3 independents, chief executive of the airport, a prominent broadcaster, and until quite recently, a former Scottish Executive Minister, who's also been chair of the Institute of Directors. So this is the Festivals Forum. It's there to implement the ambitions of Thundering Hooves, which, as I've said, are really about making sure that the economic priority is there and the global position of Edinburgh is retained. And there's also a Thundering Hooves steering group. Who's on that? That's also set in 2007. Its role is to set the agendas for the Festivals Forum. Remember the Festivals Forum we just talked about. And who's on it? Senior figures from the City of Edinburgh's Council, Festivals Edinburgh, Scottish Government, Creative Scotland, Visit Scotland, Scottish Enterprise, and the British Council. So I think beginning perhaps to see there's a certain circularity in this process, and a network of interconnected agencies and individuals at local and central government level in particular. 2007 also saw the council commission a study on cultural venues in the city, commissioned by the City Council and Scottish Enterprise Edinburgh and Lothian. And the brief was to create and deliver a communication strategy to secure general buy-in to the investment plan from the broad constituencies of interest, the cultural community, citizens panel, business assembly, and City of Edinburgh Council, and Scottish Enterprise Edinburgh and Lothian. So a further consultant study commissioned essentially to put over a communication strategy to secure buy-in from a range of agencies to the aspirations. And as an aside, one of the things that it mentions at that point, and I think this is the first time it really pops up, is the future of West Princes Street Gardens, where the speculation was it would be a good idea if there could be a multifunctional performance space with a core capacity of about 5,000 plus additional 5,000 in temporary seating. So there's rethinking about the nature of public space in the city and the role that it plays within the backdrop of this priority to be given to the economic benefits as the key issue. A couple of years later, it's partly because of the dates that it's not 2 years full time, it was shorter than that. 2009, the financial crash by this stage has happened. 2008, the major crisis, particularly in public finance, and the council, in responding to the cultural venues report, notes that big investment in cultural infrastructure will be challenging in this situation, but all the more essential to Edinburgh's economic growth, quality of life, and contribution to the nation's cultural spirit. And what they say is we need 200 to 250 million pounds investing. And again, a case has to be made for its existing and potential citizens and as the cultural gateway to the rest of the country. So again, it's trying to really make this appeal straddle between the local level and Scottish government level. Moving on, 2012, the National Tourism Strategy is published by Scottish Government. But this is a strategy that's developed by the industry body, the Scottish Tourism Alliance, and Scottish Government is supportive of that. So as the report says, Tourism 2020, the title of the report, is a strategy for the industry by the industry. It sought to break the pattern that had lasted for a long time, where there'd been little or no real growth in tourism in Scotland. And it identified the Edinburgh festivals as key assets which were to be built upon if a successful growth strategy was to be delivered. So it was produced, the Edinburgh Tourism Strategy is produced also in 2012. It's produced by the Edinburgh Tourism Action Group, which is the industry body. Over the past 20 years, they say, in other words, from the early 1990s, Edinburgh has been through an unprecedented period of growth in year-round tourism, growth driven in the first instance and subsequently sustained by, and I think this is quite a key point, large public sector investment in both product development, notably major attractions, venues and festivals, and in marketing. So what we've had is a public sector led investment basically that has underpinned the strategy of tourism growth in the capital city over a long period up to 2012. And what was needed, ETAG said, as the city's tourism strategy, was to maintain the momentum of growth to 2020 and beyond, that we needed to increase the number of visits to the city by 1/3. And they set targets for the increase in visitor numbers between, which were then exceeded between 2010 and 2015. The number of visitors to the city increased from 3.27 million to 3.85 million. And the response to that was what we then need is a new target of 4.8 million by 2020. So almost a quarter as much again within a 5 or 6 year period. So this is a kind of growth strategy that has echoes with the approach taken, say, by Royal Bank of Scotland a decade earlier. They called for strategy partners to have a bigger role in influencing bigger policy areas. So it's not just a case of the tourism strategy, people influencing tourist policy, but they should have influence over bigger policy areas, including investment in the public realm. And of course, what was also needed, it was said, was excellent communication to residents so that they would appreciate the benefits that tourism brings to the city. The tourism strategy came with a tourism strategy implementation group. And the terms of reference there are that decisions by the strategy implementation group are made for the benefit of the tourism sector in Edinburgh. No ambiguity about that. It's a single purpose organization in essence. The members earlier this year were the chief executive of the city council, the director of place of the city council, 3 leading councillors. So in total, 5 people from the city council, but 11 members drawn largely from the industry, 3 from the Tourism Action Group, chair of Edinburgh Hotels Association, chief executives of the airport, the Chamber of Commerce Visit Scotland, Marketing Edinburgh, Scottish Enterprise, Transport for Edinburgh, National Galleries. So you can see where the majority lies, and you can see what the priority is that the city council members have signed up for in terms of the terms of reference. Thundering Hooves 2.0 was commissioned 2015, 10 years after the first one. It was commissioned by the Festivals Forum. Now, you remember we met them a few minutes ago. I explained who they were, who was on it. And the message from this group of consultants was that the festivals are a major international tourism attractor, but face increasing global competition. So again, we had the same message really, that you can't stand still. There can't be a steady state. What you've got to do, you're always looking over your shoulder. You've always got to keep growing. There can be no end in sight of that because the competition is never going to go away. How did the consultants work? Well, again, very similar to the previous iteration of this theme, that there was some comparison with other cities, etc. But particularly 3 workshops with the Festivals Forum that produced a 10-year strategy and action plan. So and also that they were very complimentary to their clients. They talked about how successful the Festivals Forum had been and the Thundering Hooves steering group, and talked about marketing Edinburgh Festival City as an investment priority. So what we're really seeing here, I've tried to sum it up in this little diagram. The Thundering Hooves steering group set the Festivals Forum agenda. The Festivals Forum commission a firm of consultants who hold workshops with the Festivals Forum and with Festivals Edinburgh, and they report through the Thundering Hooves steering group to the Festivals Forum. So there's, I think, quite a circular process where the people who are commissioning reports are also key providers of evidence to the report, which shape the recommendations of the report that go back to the people who commissioned it. And as is the way with many consultants' reports, one way that you can always expect to get buy-in from your clients is to praise the virtues of strong leadership. Festivals Forum, they said, should take a leadership role in influencing future infrastructure investment in Edinburgh. So it's really, again, stepping beyond the festival to talking about Festivals Forum influencing future infrastructure investment, and also should lead the way for a green festival city. They also said that one role of leadership is to cut through the silos, that you shouldn't have a situation, for example, to interpret this, where different departments of the city council may have different stances or different regulatory roles. And I think this is quite a significant point, because as I put there, this seems to me to blur the role of the city council. On the one hand, it's got a promotional role, as we've seen through its involvement in these agencies and these reports which I've just been discussing. So it's promoting tourism in the city, it's promoting the festivals in the city, it's contributing to tourism. But the city council also has a regulatory role, and that's in terms of licensing, in terms of planning. But another way of looking at that is that these are silos. These may not necessarily have the same priorities. So leadership is required by leading figures from the city council to ensure that these silos are overcome. All behind, you remember, the priority to be given to the needs of the industry. Sorry, it's not moving on. Why is it not moving on?
Just give it a brief seconds to, there it is.
Okay,
yep.
Yeah. So I've tried to construct here a little diagram, what seems to me to capture the essence of this governance system. So we've got the Scottish Government and its agencies involved, like Scottish Enterprise, Visit Scotland, Event Scotland, and so on. I've listed them already. City councils involved, mainly through senior figures, both on the officer side and on the political side. And we have the industry lobbies that are also there, that particularly tourism, the airport, and so on, all legitimately, I would emphasize, following their own interests in respect of the various industries that they represent. And what they do is they bring in consultants who provide a bit of lubrication around this process through reports like Thundering Hoofs 2.0, the venue study, etc. And in this, there's relatively little contact with ordinary citizens of Edinburgh. And I think while there's some attractions in this model in terms of getting things done, I'm not totally dismissing it in terms of the values of partnership and how it can make things happen that might not otherwise happen. There's also a great weakness, which is, I think, that where you're basically talking to each other and confirming each other's priorities in this process, it's like wearing a set of blinkers, because you're not getting any other messages coming through. The consultants are not saying that one of the key issues should be how to make the festival more inclusive. There's occasional reference to diversity. There's some reference to greening, as I've said, but you're not really challenging the presumptions of your clients. Largely, what you're doing is talking to those clients and then feeding back to those clients their own views, endorsed by the expertise of consultants. So moving on to the third part of the talk, what have been the consequences and achievements of this process of governance that has led to the festivalisation of Edinburgh? Well, economic benefit was the bottom line. We were told that, and there clearly is some economic benefit. A report in 2019 from CEBR put the Festival Fringe contribution at £500 million in terms of direct spend into the Edinburgh economy, and another 560 million to Edinburgh and beyond through various multipliers. So not an inconsiderable sum of money, and something that is important in terms of the role of people like Visit Scotland, because the Scottish budget as a whole has faced somewhat difficult times since the mid years of this last decade. with the loss of high income generating and high tax generating jobs in the oil industry, which of course was hit by the significant fall in the oil price in 2016, 2014, and also in the finance sector, where after the crisis of 2008, that there was some retraction of the sector in Edinburgh in relation to London. So there's economic benefit. And such is this economic benefit that recently the councillor who convenes the Culture and Communities Committee stated the economic foundation of the city is based on visitors and festivals, and the Christmas market has been an important element of that. Now, I'm afraid that this, I can only say, is a misunderstanding. If you actually look at the data, it's not quite so clear-cut by any means. If you can see the graph on the right, the figures are not, I give a health warning at the start, the figures are not directly comparable. I've taken for the festivals the figures that are provided through the organizers and so on. So that they're less rigorous probably than the ones on the left of the diagram. But what we see from that diagram is what is the economic foundation of Edinburgh? It's actually public service employment, teachers, people working in hospitals, people working in public administration. And that contributes over 5 billion to the economy. Finance, banking, insurance is also massively important. And you can see that's coming in at just over 4 billion. And business services are also a significant sector coming in. They're obviously linked to the finance one as well. So if we're saying what is the economic foundation of the city, we then look along and see, yes, the festival and the fringe is bringing in 500 million, but compared with these other figures, that isn't the foundation of the economy. Even more so if you look at Christmas, Edinburgh Christmas and Edinburgh Hogmanay. And I should also emphasize that there's many other sectors that are not shown in this diagram. I just try to keep it simple. So things like construction or transport and so on, that there's other sectors which are also bringing in significant amounts. But what this shows, I think, is that with great respect, Councillor Wilson is operating under a misinterpretation of what the economic foundation of Edinburgh is. And that misinterpretation elevates the festivals and the Christmas market to a role which the data really does not support. So whose festival is it in terms of consumption? Who goes to the festivals? Well, this gives a picture, and we can see that the blue lines, the blue parts of the boxes are the people with an EH postcode, the orange rest of Scotland, and the others are elsewhere. So the fringe is much the biggest and has quite a substantial proportion of people coming in from outside of Scotland. At the other end of the scale, for example, the tattoo is much smaller in terms of audiences, not surprisingly, but actually has an even higher proportion of people coming in from outside of Scotland. So this is the general picture. We can see a little bit more here. If we look at all of the festivals in Edinburgh, which are the ones that are most consumed by or whose prime audience is local residents, local citizens? And the answer is the Children's Festival, followed closely by the Jazz and Blues Festival and the Science Festival, the Film Festival, the Book Festival. All of those have got half or more than half of their audience coming from Edinburgh. Then as you go down to the right-hand side of the graph, you see progressively the importance of Edinburgh EH residents to that audience diminishes. There have been some other economic benefits we have to look at. And this is a graph showing the construction and permissions for hotel bedrooms. And I think it's quite interesting because what we see of course, in a sense, the interesting bit isn't the completions, the under constructions, which bobble along at the bottom there. Each under constructions, obviously, completions lagged about a year behind constructions, as you can see. But much more interesting, I think, is the consents, the planning permissions that were given. And what we see, and it might seem paradoxical in some ways, that after the financial crash of 2008, there's actually a huge leap in the number of hotel permissions that are given. And it may be, I can only speculate on this, I don't think anybody would know why, but it could well be that there's a perception that at the time of the crisis, when the city council is quite worried about how to get any kind of development going again, that's a pretty good time to put in your planning application for a hotel, because they will be particularly, shall we say, sensitive to the potential economic benefits. Now, it doesn't mean to say that you actually build that hotel. You can see there's a huge difference between the number of bedrooms which have got planning permission and the ones which are actually under construction a year or two later. It then tails off. The Thundering Hoof 2 report 2015, there's a slight pickup. But as we get to the right-hand side, what you see is this sharp downturn that's occurred recently. And there's a bit of a clue in the bottom there. So what's happening? Well, it seems quite possible that that downturn has coincided, that downturn in seeking hotel permissions has coincided with the boom in short-term holiday lets in the shorthand Airbnb, although we recognize there are many other providers in that market. So the growth of the platform economies and the escalation of the number of properties in Edinburgh which were taken over as investment properties, bought up as investment properties to capitalize upon the short-term lets boom, which is partly, of course, driven by the premium returns that can be achieved during the periods of the festivals. As many people will know, particularly those who came to our event last January, a further consequence of the festivalisation process has been the commodification of public spaces in Edinburgh, notably this blanking out of the views into Princess Street Gardens for public safety reasons, I emphasize, so that people don't spill out onto the road. Nothing to do with trying to stop people get a free view of the summer sessions that was added. It's not part of the festivals, but going on during the festival. So all of that was documented last year, or earlier this year rather, with the Cockburn's major event. So this diagram tries to, again, see how festivalisation and the need to keep ahead of the thundering hoofs of the competitors to ensure that year on year the festivals grow, tourism grows, GDP grows. That this is the sort of cycle that we can trace out. Festivalisation does indeed boost tourism, it boosts GDP, and it boosts seasonal jobs. It boosts hotel occupancy, and it boosts permissions. And it creates real opportunities to invest in short-term lets. However, it also displaces local residents, not least because of the loss of affordable housing opportunity. And it means that we get into the situation of what we described earlier this year as city for sale, where public spaces are essentially seen as assets to be sweated for value. And underpinning all this are really two models, I think, of place management. One is a sort of extractive economy model, sort of mindset that operates particularly in industries like mining. So translated into place management, what it means is you commodify the place as a product that can be marketed to consumers. You monetize the assets of the place to extract maximum value. You accumulate the capital, then you reinvest it, not necessarily in that same place, but wherever the returns are best. And when the place ceases to yield a proper return, you disinvest and withdraw. The alternative model, which has for 145 years really been the Cockburn's model, is to say that we are stewards of the city, at the place, and we have responsibility not just to short-term gain, but to future generations. We also say that the assets of the place are by their very nature civic, and they're owned by everyone and shared by everyone. And to sustain that, we need to invest, but also to regulate effectively. And we need then, when there are tough times, as there are at present, to cherish that place through hard times and to look after it. So finally, getting near the end, you're pleased to know what is going to happen. We know 2020 was a year like no other in terms of the festivals. The festivalization process was halted with the virus, but there are also issues around carbon neutrality and the city's targets to be carbon neutral by 2030. So over the last couple of years, we in the Cockburn have developed a report, a program called Our Unique City. And we updated it from the 2019 version to take account of the impact of the pandemic. And what we say in that is that it seems, sadly, that job losses and falling incomes will occur and will widen those inequalities that already existed within the city. We also say that the city must take the climate emergency seriously, and also the findings of the Poverty Commission, which I referred to earlier on. And trying to find a way through these difficult times, what we suggest is that localization, inclusion, community wealth building, and a green recovery should be the markers to steer a path forward. And in this, the festivals do have a role to play. We're not anti-festival, we're anti-festivalization. So what could we do to make the festivals greener? Well, for a start, the festivals need to meet the carbon reduction targets of the city and to be compliant with ISO 2012, which is the standard in relation to events. We found that you can work virtual events, and it seems almost inevitable that virtual events will be part of a future menu. And that will also have the virtue of reducing air miles. And we need to think carefully about which events can be best delivered through a virtual mechanism, which can then also reach global audiences. We also echo the campaign that the Cockburn was running after the mess that was left in East Princess Street Gardens after last winter's Christmas Edinburgh and Hogmanay. We say keep off the grass, that you should not be staging high intensity events over a fair period of time on grassed areas in the city, because it basically damages the soil, it damages the grass. And so we say use hard standing areas. We also think there should be study of capacity limits to areas that prevent them from becoming overcrowding. And we also believe that the festivals should work to support local businesses and recognize that the pop-up businesses, which have been such a prominent feature of the Winter Festival, for example, but also the summer festivals, are actually in competition with local businesses on which year-round jobs depend, and which, again, post-COVID, as we all know, facing a particularly tough time. So support local businesses, don't encourage pop-up businesses to compete with them. We've also said that we could spread the load and the benefits of the festivals, disperse the venues across the city, but link that into a wider neighbourhood development strategy that's informed from bottom up. Also, why not spread the festivals through the year to avoid the peak that has characterized August. Already we know the film festival seems to operate perfectly satisfactorily in June. The science festival operates around Easter. So it can be done. Why not move a significant part of the fringe into a comedy festival, perhaps in March? This would also mean that from the point of view of hoteliers, the shoulder months were better served in terms of numbers. You depress the peak a bit, but you spread the benefit through the rest of the year. But most important of all, perhaps, we think that the festival should try to nurture and promote local talent and create legacies for Edinburgh. And in this, Terry mentioned it earlier on the slide there shows it. Much could be learnt from the Craig Miller Festival Society and what it did in terms of cultural regeneration, cultural-led regeneration of the area in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. And if you want to follow more of that, you should check out the Cockburn Conversation with Andy Crummy, which is on YouTube channel. Finally, we should think about a festival of Edinburgh. We have Edinburgh festivals, but almost bizarrely, for a city whose greatest glory is its built-in natural environment, which is its main attraction to tourists, we do not have a festival of Edinburgh. We do not have a festival that celebrates the city and its people. So what we're suggesting is, why not think of a festival of Edinburgh, which would, as I say, celebrate the diverse population and the city's environment. And we have a model for it already with Edinburgh Doors Open Day, run by the Cockburn for the last 30 years. And we've also had initiatives like One City that the City Council have taken. Now, the Doors Open Day involves a wide variety of organizations, schools, colleges, universities, businesses, faith communities, all open their doors and welcome guests in. And this year we did it virtually online because of the pandemic. But there's plenty of willingness of organizations in the city to pull together, to share their knowledge, their know-how, their spaces with the rest of the community, not charging them. It's free, it's open, it's inclusive. So why can't we use that kind of spirit to showcase Edinburgh to the citizens and certainly to welcome others who want to visit us at that time of year? Could have a separate theme for each year. And at the same time, now we've learned how to do it, we could stream it to the world, connecting to and beyond the diaspora. And I was very impressed that when we put the Doors Open Day online this time, I think there was 54 different people from 54 different countries connected with it, including many exiled Scots who were delighted to again connect with their city. So there's my ideas. I say support Doors Open Days, support our campaigns, support our staff, and if you can, join, donate, leave legacies to enable us to do this work and to carry forward the debates in the city that need to be had about the future of the festivals. Thank you.
Gosh, well, Cliff, thank you kind of very much for that tour de force of kind of a sweeping history of the kind of issues, structures, and governance of the Edinburgh festivals. And really, I think kind of asking that question, loudly about whose festival is it anyway. As you've been giving your talk, I've been monitoring the kind of chats kind of page, and we'll capture kind of all of those and make them available in kind of due course as well. But there's been an awful lot of kind of issues or points raised, as well as a number of questions. So, if I can just highlight some of the kind of issues that people were posting on chat as you were giving your talk. People were saying it was too crowded, it was kind of overpriced, that there's just too great an emphasis on the peak times of tourism when the city is already kind of busy. one person made a comment that we need to have a shift from growth to a more sustainable curation as the main management driver for the festivals going forward. And questions about quality, compassion, equality, climate change were all raised, and one noting that an awful lot of the jobs being created out of much of it tend to be low pay and insecure in their kind of tenure. So I guess the kind of first question that came out from one saying is the relationship in between the increased festivalization and some of the wider impacts you talked about in terms of hotel growth, in terms of population displacement from short-term kind of lets. What thoughts do you have about trying to kind of remedy some of those challenges?
Well, clearly one of the problems with short-term lets was that there was a very weak regulatory framework to start off with, and that was part and parcel of the growth. And in fairness, that was not just true of Edinburgh. It was a situation where the platform technology got going much more quickly than regulatory mechanisms could be put in place, and many cities, many tourist cities in particular across Europe and other countries, other parts of the world were affected. We do now have some progress in respect of regulation of short-term lets, and Scottish Government has been working on this, and there is the prospect of stronger controls coming in. There are different models that could be looked at, and again, the Cockburn report from 2018 covered some of those. In terms of hotel developments, I think we've of course had just this last couple of weeks or 2 or 3 weeks ago the decision on the Old Royal High School Hotel, which really fits into this, because a lot of the justification for that was that it would bring in international tourists, particularly from Eastern Asia, who wouldn't otherwise come to Edinburgh and would be high spenders and would generate a economic bonanza for the city. Rather with what I showed you in the presentation just now about the festivals, the relative significance of the hotel that would have been developed was seriously exaggerated, because there were some flaws in the initial economic impact assessment that they did. But also, when you look at it in terms of the overall Edinburgh economy, the hotel was not that significant in terms of its marginal impact. So I think we need a clear set of policies. I think we need to recognise that the new local development plan that the city's about to unveil the next stage of in the next few weeks, I think, really needs to put conservation of the city at its centre, needs to think much more creatively about what reviving the economy post-COVID means. And again, we provided some comments in our unique city about quite a lot of that. So I think it needs a confident regulation combined with imaginative moves to think outside the box and connect with local communities all across the city to try and make much more effort to spread the benefits of economic development when they arrive at Edinburgh, because there's still a lot of need within the city, and that's been exacerbated by the current pandemic.
Brilliant. One question that came out from your presentation was the kind of governance structures and frameworks that you kind of highlighted, which was seeming as if you were saying that in effect there was an echo chamber of the sector really talking to itself about how important it was, and that was emphasizing its desire for growth and going forward. So what kind of suggestions would you make in trying to shift that kind of consultancy kind of model or that governance model into one which is more inclusive?
Well, I think, for one thing, I think the city council representatives have to ask whether it's compatible for somebody in a public service role to sign up to terms of reference which say that the prime objective is to further the interests of a particular sector. It seems to me the essence of, I have no problem whatsoever with the with the director of Edinburgh Airport trying to maximise the number of people passing through the airport. That's his job. He's probably getting paid a bonus if he achieves it. I have no problem with hoteliers trying to increase the number of people staying in the hotels. That's their job. I think if you're in a public service role, it's much more complex, because the very essence of public service is you've got to balance competing demands. And there are many very good cases that could be made. It's not easy, but what you have to do is find a way to understand them, to evaluate them, and to, as I say, reach some accommodation, often between competing aims. So I think that's a starting point in terms of how we need to move forward. I've slightly lost track. So what was the last bit of the question?
Well, how do you burst that echo chamber bubble?
Okay, I think you've got to have wider public discussions. You can't just click into a situation where there's this very close nexus between industry, Scottish government and local government. As I say, partnerships can deliver things, but there has to be a community dimension to it as well. There has to be a civic society dimension. And I do think that if you'd got that, we would have avoided quite a few things, because at the very least, the messages would have been there that there are some problems with the direction we're going in. I mean, okay, probably nobody would have said we might have a pandemic in 2020, but I certainly think, questions could have been asked of, is this really a sustainable route to go down? I mentioned briefly the Royal Bank of Scotland, but it is the analogy that strikes me, that the mindset seems to have been, we've got to outcompete every other place. Being second is nowhere. So we've got to go, 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 and we're always going to have to go, go, go. Now, I just feel if we'd had some broader representation, some broader civic dialogues, somebody along the way would have at least raised a few awkward questions about that. And in the end, that would actually have benefited the city, the Scottish government, and the industries themselves.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. And I guess relating to that is we have time really for one more question, I'm afraid, kind of on it, because there's so many more kind of points that have been raised, but it came in very early, and it's that kind of wider question about, whilst we've been dealing with the global pandemic of COVID, it has deflected our thinking about the global catastrophe or kind of challenges that we have around climate change and climate mitigation. How would you kind of begin building sustainability into the kind of festivals of Edinburgh? Is there any kind of immediate thoughts you have on achieving that?
Well, I think I provided a few things in the presentation, and you said that came in early, so perhaps the slide I put mentioned some of the things. I do think that there's a willingness from the people on the festival side to look at this. I think the tourism strategy consultation that took place just about 12 months ago also seemed to indicate a new willingness to listen. So what we should try and do, I think, is build dialogues between people with the expertise in terms of greening economies, in terms of sustainable environments, in terms of sustainable urban design. We need a broad commission, a broad room where we can meet and get some understanding of how you can do these things, because there's plenty of evidence out there. And I think crucially, we can't just talk about getting back to normal as quickly as possible, because, as I've tried to show, and perhaps I apologize if I underemphasize the climate dimension, I certainly didn't mean to. The climate dimension is still there. COVID changed everything. It did not change the climate emergency. If anything, it exacerbated it in terms of the victims. So it's really crucial, I think, that we commit in rebuilding the festivals, in recreating the great enjoyment that we've all have from living in Edinburgh, that we put the climate emergency centre stage and work together on solutions.
Brilliant. I'm sure there are many people in this kind of virtual meeting would kind of agree. That's been an absolutely kind of fantastic presentation and kind of talk, Cliff, on whose festivals are as well. And just to capture that kind of point about needing a big room to discuss this in, it's worth just kind of noting to those who are still with us that at the end of January, the Cockburn will be holding a mini conference, I think we call it, following on from the success of the one we had in January called City for Sale, where we began looking at the questions of the commodification of open space. And in this, what we want to do is explore that issue that Cliff has raised about that imperative of beginning to think about a festival of Edinburgh, of recognizing it's the historic townscape and landscape and architecture that kind of drives the success of the city, both domestically and in terms of as a tourist destination. So during this kind of event, we'll be putting on a series of kind of panels and panelists to kind of explore and debate further the kind of issues that Cliff has kind of raised, thinking about a shift from the Edinburgh festivals to a festival of Edinburgh. So we hope to be looking at the kind of past, present, and future drivers in terms of what that might look at. We'll have experts considering the capacity of the city as a World Heritage City to kind of absorb development and growth and increasing or whatever sustainable numbers of tourism or tourist activity it can absorb. I think we'll be looking at kind of issues around the festivals as in that dichotomy of, is it a cultural event or a cultural element, or is it a tourist kind of element, as we begin seeing what is the balance in between those two. And of course, quite critically to it, as you've highlighted, it's about what the residents' perspective kind of is in terms of what happens kind of in their city. And I think it really kind of captures the point you raised. It's not about being anti-festival, but it's about anti-festivalization of the kind of city. So that'll be at the end of January. Watch the space, keep an eye on us on our social media platforms, or send us kind of an email and we'll make sure you kind of find out about the details of that when it comes forward. So it just leaves me with the kind of final task to remind you, if you're going to be tweeting or posting on Facebook about this, remember to kind of include us at the Cockburn. And if you've enjoyed what you've kind of heard and really enjoyed Professor Hague's talk, do remember that you could actually kind of donate to us by text. Just text Edinburgh to 70085. Give us a fiver, it'd be most appreciated. Or perhaps more importantly, consider joining a member, as DJ and my colleague is putting up some of the kind of details for that. We do need your help to keep these debates kind of going. So do consider kind of joining us or using any of the number of kind of platforms to kind of help us. Indeed, some of it at no cost to yourself at all. So I think it's just leaves me the final task of this kind of evening. We're a little bit over kind of our the self-appointed hour, self-allotted hour, but to thank Professor Hague, Cliff Hague, the chairman of the Cockburn, for what's been a very stimulating kind of talk as the Cockburn kind of annual lecture, which has highlighted the kind of issues that we've all been thinking about and musing about what not only has happened, but what perhaps needs to kind of happen in the future. And there'll be more of that coming. So with my thanks and with everybody else's kind of thanks, Cliff, thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you.